The most disturbing patient I ever treated as a child psychologist is now training to become a surgeon. About 20 years ago, I was working as a child psychologist in a small town and had a 6-year-old patient referred to me for mandatory counseling by the school. Although I only worked with her for a few sessions and this was years ago, she was probably the child who disturbed me the most to this day. She was originally referred for graphic pictures she drew in class of people being maimed or unalived. She did not have exposure to violence or violent media at home, so these were entirely the product of her imagination. She was also somehow involved in an incident where another child was seriously hurt under unclear circumstances, but she could not be concretely tied to what happened. I found out that she had vivid fantasies of carving living things open and at times had acted out these fantasies on small animals. She told me freely like she was proud of it. She also tested at a college reading level at 6 years old. There were multiple times where she would say things that even took me a second to follow. That suggested both a quickness and a grasp of double meaning and nuance that would be considered far beyond what was developmentally expected for her age. The parents were white-collar immigrants in a stable and supportive household, but there was clearly some cultural barrier because they kept saying she was good because she was smart and tested high. They didn't seem to understand when I tried to explain that being good academically and being well-behaved or moral were not the same thing. Most disturbingly, I noticed they were, intentionally or unintentionally, teaching her masking behaviors to conceal these impulses or get what she wanted by manipulating others rather than putting herself at risk, without actually addressing the underlying problem. It becomes very hard to intervene on children who have learned these behaviors because they keep escalating while flying under the radar until they do something they can no longer get away with as older teens or adults and the legal system comes down on them. I strongly recommended both to the parents and the school that they should pursue further and more intensive counseling for their daughter than I could provide. At the time, I had a colleague who was piloting an inpatient program for intervening early on younger children with extremely destructive impulses who I gave them the contact for. The parents did not seem open to this at all and abruptly moved away before we had finished our sessions. A couple years later, I also moved to a new city, but I always wondered what happened to her, fearing she had ended up in juvenile hall or worse, prison. Very recently, I caught up with some old colleagues and learned through happenstance that she was now in training to become a surgeon at an elite East Coast institution. When I found this out, I felt an immediate visceral chill go through me. Someone in that position of trust, with that level of intelligence and training, has the potential to do a lot of harm, which might not be discovered for years, if ever. Part of me, I am ashamed to admit, even felt that this was a worse outcome. I feel guilty for having these feelings at all because they do not accord with my values or training as a professional. I strongly believe people are not at fault for their mental health problems or personality disorders. Such people are far more likely to become the victims of crimes than perpetrators, and I certainly do not believe that anyone should be punished or precluded from certain careers because of a perceived predisposition to crime, particularly as a child. I have also had to work hard to undo a lot of the biases that my professors passed on to me in graduate school decades ago that are not based in evidence, such as some people are born psychopaths, a term we no longer use, and are destined to hurt people. I want with every fiber of my being to believe that she received treatment and eventually realized a calling to help people. I want to believe that, but there's a feeling I can't quite escape.